one aspect for blockchain and use case is the CBDCs, these upcoming CBDCs, like central bank digital currencies. Like 3 countries already accepted this. Like, so there's a regulation that's coming to the ways of those countries. And in the UK, for instance, where I live, Bank of England already like drafting a CBDC application. So we use money in digital means like for quite some time now, but for the first time in history, we will have like real-time positioning of the money, real-time traceability and regulativeness of the money. So all these things and the programmable aspect of digital currency, and it's going to be all underpinned and powered by blockchain technology again. Again, there are different types of blockchain, so I don't want to get into those details, but this is definitely one use case that's coming on our ways, whether we accept it or not. So the second part, I guess, like that I see like this is going to most likely change is, like as Cam spoke, I think Metaverse is going to be another angle. So because we are moving into an era of digital, so like, yes, physical and also the digital. So this digital twin concept. So this comes into like avatars as an individual, but also like, I guess like a businesses, like there is a digital twin of the business. And what you do in this digital world will impact your actual revenue in the physical world, and vice versa. What you do in the physical world will impact like how much investment you're doing, how much services that you're providing on the metaverse will impact your metaverse like revenues or metaverse presence. So where the trick is going to come from a blockchain aspect is like, I see DAOs is going to be a very interesting angle. So like these autonomous organizations in the metaverse world and the cryptocurrency aspect within the metaverse world will actually impact on the physical realm. I guess one other to mention, probably now I'm just thinking out loud, I think is the federated use cases of blockchain. So it was always there. Not many people know, but there are a lot of federated blockchains existing right now, and it will just continue to grow. It's not like publicly available like blockchains, but like when you have like 7 or 10 different like organizations coming and creating this federated structure for blockchain, there is a real use cases for that. And we have done it in the past. We helped some of our clients to achieve this mission. And I'm sure like we will have more of these scenarios coming. And I guess like distributed apps and decentralized apps are going to be another one that we will see in the near future, more adapted.
Thanks, Isa. And as you just mentioned, this term phygital, the physical and the digital coming together, there's obviously a very clear tie-in to all things in our virtual worlds, the avatars. I know, Cam, coming over to you, that you mentioned earlier, having the sneakers in the avatar, we want to have them in real life. How do we monetize on some of those experiences? But it's also true that for many of the next generations, that's the only world they know. A fun, small story. I went in to talk about my work to my son's 4th grade class, and one of them saw Metaverse, identified on my slide of things that Globant works in the spaces they work in, and they asked me about it. And I said, out of the 9 and 10-year-olds in the class, 24 of them, oh, how many of you are familiar with the metaverse? All 24 rose their hands. And then I said, how many of you are actively in the metaverse? Whether you have an avatar, you're playing games, and about 20 rose their hands. And that to me was shocking in itself. So I'm just curious, Cam, in the work that you're doing and the places that you're seeing, how does this digital world become reality? Because it is reality for many, but not for all yet.
Yeah, so I think that's a great place to start, because one of the trends that we're seeing in terms of coming from the gaming side is that the younger generation games a lot more than the generation before and the generation before that, and it's usurping media consumption, so television and movies as well. So they're comparable in that generation, and so that to my earlier point, like having a brand presence there, that's where kids are gonna meet you first there, right? Your tweens and your preteens are gonna meet you first there, and having those touch points in your e-commerce systems to, okay, so when you purchase this digital asset, you also get a coupon for this physical asset, or you unlock certain benefits in the real world, bringing them through that portal where they maybe wouldn't see your brand, they wouldn't know who you are at that age. Meeting these gamers where they are can be super beneficial to building that bridge. And through the blockchain is one of the technologies that enables that. It's certainly not the only one, but the interesting thing I think about blockchain is not when it's highly visible to the users, but when it's invisible, and they get that serendipitous benefit of that technology of saying, oh, cool, I bought this thing and I automatically get it here, because there's a representation of that asset that lives not in a walled garden, not in somebody's database somewhere, but on a publicly available space. There are lots of questions to be answered about how you give a kid a hardware, a wallet, a crypto wallet, that should be answered by the technology at some point. But I think that's that bridge that allows you to take the things that are happening in digital space and tie them to physical in a more generalized way.
And Cam, just to follow up on that, because one thing we were talking about earlier with both JJ and Isa is just the good and bad of technology. And is there, this is a very fundamental, foundational question of good versus bad and ethics, but is there something that you think the general public is still fearful of when it comes to the metaverse, these virtual realities, and us living in them in some essence, especially those next generations? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there are two places here. So there's the dystopian aspect, right? We're all going to have a headset on and we're not going to be connecting with each other. And I think that most AI suffered from this as well. Like most things that are worst nightmares usually are half-truths. Like there's reality to where we should be concerned, and then there's real utility in these technologies. But I think that on the other side of that, blockchain, crypto, they came in and they were technologies that were they were made accessible to a lot of people before any security was put in place. So you've got people not understanding what a wallet is, not understanding what their private key is, not to share it, also not understanding like how you send and move these things, and the protections not being there. Banking infrastructure, if it had the same problems, everyone would have their money stolen. And so crypto, blockchain really needs to go back to that, maybe not regulation, but looking at, we've now proven that the technology can work and people will use it. Now let's go back and find out how we can make it secure, so that way people aren't confused about who they're giving their wallet, their private keys to, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think JJ, just going over to you, that makes me think of course, there's been a lot of conversation, and if you're reading the news daily about ChatGPT and where there's learned behavior and unlearned behavior, where you can't trust it completely, there's caveats everywhere, there's disclaimers. What are your thoughts as we think about this, making real-time decisions and how it can truly benefit our businesses, our operations, us as individuals, to the caveats, the risks that are still out there, and where we need to be cautious of that? How would you advise the masses?
Oh, that's a complex question. So I would say that there's definitely a benefit in having that, let's say, automated decision-making real time, especially in the context of the increased frequency and complexity of decisions we're faced every day. We have limited attention spans. We have a limited cognitive capacity. At some point on the decision number 25, we don't really care. And the point is, maybe the first 25 decisions were not really the important ones we should have been tackling. And so leveraging these kind of systems helps out a lot in that sense. But the point is, do we at some point stop and reflect on whether we like the direction that we're going? Do we at some point think about whether that string of decisions is actually implying something larger, or is it just happenstance or random decisions? Because that has a lot to do with that. But there's also these other aspects about how our truth patterns change. Like, for instance, one of the risks or one of the problems with generative AI is the amount of, let's say, misinformation or fake news or deep fakes or a lot of generated content. So whenever you see a picture that somebody says, look, this happened, you won't really believe it. And the thing is, that might even be good for us, because we are nowadays trusting so much, let's say, modified or affected or edited pieces of information, that we're going to go back a little bit into sources of trust. And I think that blockchain there will have a lot of room to play in terms of kind of the custody chain of information and who said what and where and how you prove that it was real. But it also will kind of lower our noise levels from the world. Let's say that, I don't know, some generations, anything that was said on the TV was, oh, it's true because it's on the TV. And then, oh, but I read it online. And now it's, yeah, you saw a picture. So what? I don't buy it. Yeah, you heard an audio. So what? And so we will pay much more attention to who is telling what and how that came to be rather than to the medium. And so we will be able to ignore a lot of that noise. That's going to be the cleansing aspect. Now, there's going to be growing pains. And for that, we will need other, let's say, AI to help us decide, to help us focus, and to help us find kind of the truth. So I think that's kind of the balance. But there's probably another aspect about that kind of assisted decision-making, which is that if the more AI native somebody is, like when we're talking about digital natives and then AI natives, and maybe there will be a metaverse native, the more AI native somebody is, the more they see these kind of systems as something, let's say alive, but I'm not mean alive, like something that has movements of their own. And they interact with it more like an animal than a system. It's not a machine that has rules and concrete things. It's rather like, well, if I do this, then you do that. And so next time I will do this and that. And they start interacting and co-adapting to the algorithms. You see this with kids with TikTok. It takes them 5 seconds to find the kind of materials they want. You see them adapting to kind of the spell correctors of the phone, which drive me nuts when they are not correcting me in the direction I want to go. And they just assume it as it is at face value. And they learn how to leverage the learned behavior. And so it's going to be an evolution and a co-adaptation there. And that's going to be really interesting because that's going to make us do things in a completely different manner. Now, whether we will stop and reflect at some point about our past decisions, or whether we're just going to say, yeah, that's something deciding for me, I don't care. That's a tricky part, but it will let us focus on the kind of need to know basis. What decisions do I need to participate? The other ones that I don't care, you know what, take care of that for me.
JJ, that's oddly a bit scary, because what you're explaining is truly human nature, right? We have learned behaviors. We have our brains are computers, so they are learning as we go, and we adapt to that learning as well. So I think there, as you were speaking, I was just thinking of all the different relevances of, if you have small children, how you're trying to teach them certain things and certain behaviors. And as they grow, they adapt to some, they ignore some, the ones you want them to not ignore, they tend to ignore. We'll see some similar things, obviously, on the side of AI. We'll see some things that are learned and things that we have to adapt and maybe unlearn to relearn, which is a very tough thing for humans, much easier, I hope, for AI. But I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic for us, is how do we adapt and move quickly through it? Which brings me over to another topic, Isa, on adapting and learning and that rapid movement. And it's this concept of low code, no code. And I think that for many, maybe it's not at its hype cycle right now. Some know about it, some don't. So I'd love for you first, maybe just to define what we mean when we say low code. And also, just as importantly, how is it becoming more and more relevant today, especially with the newer or younger generations, or just new to tech?
Yeah. So I guess the definition of low code is basically you don't code as much as you need, basically, in the typical sense. Like typically for any enterprise scale applications, we are writing almost like 1 million lines of code. And that's all human cognitive load. In the low code realm, we're talking about actually dramatically reducing this to, say, 1/10 of it, maybe even 1/20 of it, and write the similar lines of code to do the same kind of thing. And as any hype, I guess there is reality to this, and there's also like a little bit of a buzz aspect of it. We actually have a platform, Genexus, which is a low-code, no-code platform, and it's been in the industry for quite some time now. And we have had many successes and also many scars. We know where it doesn't work, for instance. So I guess when you go back all the way, I think I'm going to show up my age here, but when you go back all the way to 20, 25 years ago, and Delphi and VB6 and all these tools were helping us to do the similar kind of thing, almost like having a low code to generate like user interfaces and interaction points for the users. We learned that some of it actually doesn't work. Like it's very hard to maintain. There's not like a typical like a software development lifecycle that you can apply to that. Like you cannot do like typical things like TDD, etc. But over the decades, this thing has evolved. Like now there are use cases where we can actually genuinely get benefit out of it. Where I think it shines really is like if you have like parallel tracks that you wanted to do where, there's a lot of like foundational elements or infrastructure work needs to be done, as well as some of the like a front end or like user touch point, data entry screens, etc. So this is extremely useful. You can actually quickly get it running like in just a matter of like hours, not days or weeks. Another aspect you could do is like you could actually create internal applications where you can template it so that any internal back office applications or mid office applications that you're creating, you can actually like deduce from the original template, there's a lot of use cases that we are having as well. I guess like any POC, seasonal work, temporal work, this is just perfect use cases for low code, no code. The magic is happening right now. The realm is also changing with the AI boosting, particularly the generative AI. Like when you combine these things, the true no-code experience started to show up. I'm genuinely like just using like a particular prompt, you can actually generate like a big chunk of the app, and all you have to do is just tidy up, do a little bit of a makeup to make it like a lot more, I guess, like brand color or like brand applications, so that your customers don't feel the difference. Again, like I'm just going to give an example from GenXus. So we already started adapting AI into GenXus. So we call it GenXus Next. And with a bit of a prompt, you can actually create like a true like a template applications where you can then apply your style guide, etc. on top of it to turn into a real enterprise grade applications. Would it scale? Would it come to like a really like an internet banking or like a core banking application kind of thing? I don't think so. So that's a bit of a hype, to be honest. But could it be like a back office application in a true nature, or could it have a user facing screens and customer touch points? Yes, truly, like we can definitely leverage these points. And I think like more and more these kind of apps is gonna like just grow in the market. Like we're gonna see like the cognitive nature of our interaction with these platforms is gonna move from actual code entry to prompt engineering. So more prompt engineering happens, like you're gonna get like a better result, because that's how like it's evolving right now. And I think that the industry is gonna move towards that direction.
As you were talking about that, I recall something JJ had mentioned, that low code can be seen kind of as a nuanced language than code. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, JJ?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the idea is that let's say that you know only 100 words. And so to say anything, you need to build a lot of kind of building blocks on top of that. And in some sense, heavy code applications do that. I mean, you're really building it by sticking together a lot of little pieces and repeating them and all of that. And then you gain a new language, you gain nuance. You can describe a color that is in between blue and violet. And that opens new experiences for you. You can be more specific, more concise, and more directly convey whatever you wanted to do. So when you're using low code in this manner, specifically with generative AI, you're just communicating the general sense or the idea, and everything else gets built. So you're communicating about your intent and objective, not the how. And that is a much more kind of dense form of information. It requires a lot of AI in that sense to kind of interpret what you're trying to say, build a lot of systems in the back, but it's a shortcut. It's a way for us to kind of work on a higher cognitive level and be more focused on what we want to do, not on the specifics of all the trail of decisions that we need to make.
That's a great point. I mean, there will be instances where a shortcut is perfectly fine. It meets all the requirements and needs that you have. And then there are other instances where no, the shortcut just gets you started. And then you have to build on that to make it real and create that experience that you're looking at. And I think that experience is really important. Cam, coming back to you on this topic of, low code is a way to have a new language, a new experience, reducing the time to market. How does that link to what you're seeing happening in the metaverse as we think about reducing the time to an audience? How do we get to a broader set or increase our set of audience members, whether it's new generations, new genres? And what are some success cases maybe you've seen and how tech is leveraged to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, I find the conversation about low code and the relationship to AI interesting, because if you look at like the history of development, it's always been abstractions on top of abstractions. Like we start with machine code and we get to programming languages like C, and then we build on top of that something like Java. And then we get to low code. Low code is sort of describing these functions that we were writing in code as these blocks of things that we can now execute at a almost like visual coding level. And then there's AI, where in the metaverse, we're looking at, okay, so how can we enable people who aren't 3D artists, who aren't level designers, to create 3D environments? And that goes from writing natural language into prompts, into connecting to whatever chunks of logic that have been created in low code down to code throughout that ecosystem. So we're seeing in time to market, there's like a path, especially for the metaverse, through all of those technologies that get us to the place where even if you don't have a dedicated 3D modeler, the future holds a place where you can generate some models based on some 3D assets based on models that have been trained, and you can generate code to animate those models in ways that are a lot easier and a lot quicker than it used to be. Building games takes a lot of people and a lot of time. And these technologies kind of reduce that a little bit, especially for those that that don't have the skills for that.
Nisa, did they wanted to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I guess like absolutely agree with Cam here. I think that the more usage, like there will be potentially a point where we will be generating the entire metaverse using maybe natural language, because like we're coming to a point where these infrastructural or platformification of these metaverse components are going to be a commodity at some point. So right now, like obviously the big companies are investing heavily, like billions of dollars into that. And now these are a little bit of bubbles and they are not connected with each other. But more and more adoption happens by the user. We're going to see a demand for those customers to have this interoperability between different metaverses. And that's how actually Web 2.0 actually evolved, right? And you look at it in the history. So more and more these things happen. Most likely we are going to see clusters of these big interoperable metaverses. And at that point, it is basically an open source metaverse platform. Maybe there will be like a similar to cloud services, there will be metaverse services that's going to be, again, like an easy application using natural or a language or like a prompt to actually build some of those like easy things. I'm going to give just like an example for just to illustrate the point, I guess. Like say you're onboarding people to your organization. Right now, all the onboarding effort that you can do for your organization has to be built from scratch with these metaverse platforms. But later on, when these things become slightly more commodity, you can actually build those things super fast by just defining your policies for your organization. And that will be like for any new employee coming to your organization, can just take a little like education, and that's basically it. Another aspect to all these things, I guess, like that we are seeing, it's actually creating potentially new jobs that we have never seen as well. So in the old days, like I mean, when you mentioned, oh, I'm a prompt engineer, no one would care. But now I think it's going to turn into a real title. I'm a senior prompt engineer, kind of. So we're going to see these new job titles emerging as well, where technology is actually helping human to augment all these like mechanical tasks and take away, and so that we can take these our cognitive skills into like the rightful places. So I think we're going to see more and more this coming.
Yeah, and I think that prompt engineers in the metaverse, when the hype cycle was really high, we saw Decentraland employing people in these virtual spaces to host events and to be working there while they were playing poker or whatever was happening in those virtual worlds. And so that was kind of getting interesting as to like, could you work entirely inside of this gaming platform? And to the point about low code earlier, and that building interconnections between these metaverse platforms to make them interoperable, we also see a lot of clients that we're working with, a lot of companies are saying, okay, cool, I can have an experience in your metaverse platform, but if I can't build connections to my systems outside, to my analytics systems or to my backend databases, like I don't really capture that value. And so I think we're going to see a lot of low code connectors between these platforms and backend systems of the creators who are building inside of them.
Thank you for sharing that, Cam. And I want to first thank and encourage everyone who is asking questions, whether through social or directly on the live stream, and adding in your comments. Really appreciate you doing that. Please continue to do that. We are monitoring it. And on that note, there are a few questions from social that I want to make sure we get to. Along those lines of metaverse, are we actually going to have a fully connected metaverse ever? What's your opinion on that, Cam?
I mean, I think given enough time and enough infinite number of monkeys writing, like we could have a fully connected metaverse. There's a lot of stepping stones for the technology to be able to facilitate like a infinite person metaverse where there's just people coming in and out. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to have fully connected metaverses, but we need standards and we need infrastructure that's paid for by somebody or decentralized so everybody pays a little bit. I think those are the two, is standards to facilitate interoperability between metaverse platforms and that infrastructure to host game servers, networking. This is a very challenging problem in gaming, is to have low latency, always on networking in games. And that's going to be a challenge that needs to be addressed before we can have that fully connected metaverse.
Thanks, Cam. I appreciate you looking into your 8-ball and giving us that answer, because I think that's probably the case we can see across the board. However, a very maybe specific and tactical question, JJ, I'll come over to you, is there's a question on, do any of these technologies, and maybe AI specifically, have an impact on voice translators for apps like TikTok or otherwise? Or can you give us some context as to how it can be used in those areas?
Absolutely. I think that this kind of technologies, generative AI, will actually make languages, expressions, text, and different mediums be all one and the same. In the sense that, let's say that you can replicate the sound of my voice, but saying something completely different. Well, that something completely different could be another language. It could be with other inflections. It could be with other accents. It could be on text. It could be on Braille. It could be on animating something for somebody else to see. And it's going to be seamless. The challenge right now is that doing that requires a lot of computing power. And so we have to evolve that to a point where we can do that in real time and in a manner that feels natural. Otherwise, it will feel kind of gimmicky. It will feel kind of fake. You will still understand that, but it will not feel natural. And so you will not connect. That's kind of the point. If you realize that there's something going on, you will instinctively not trust it enough. It will seem fake. But there will come a point, and I don't think it will be too long, where I could just be talking in Spanish and you will be hearing myself in English or in any other language. The challenge there would be, how do we cover languages that are, let's say, what is called low resource in the technical terms, which is that we don't have a lot of data online or registered or audio, because they either belong to past minorities or they aren't really represented online. And so maybe talking those languages is going to be harder. And there is a lot of effort in including that. There are models from the main players called like No Language Left Behind and things like that. But how to make people included in their way of talking and speaking and accents and languages, that's going to be a challenge as well. But we will get there. And we will be having these kind of conversations all in our, let's say, natural language and just talking with each other.
And I do think, JJ, to that point, that's a little bit of the beauty of the upside of some of these technologies. I know there's a lot of fear, but the upside is that it will be way more inclusive, way more connected, and it gives you access to things that today, you know, to your point, web searches, you happen chance run across something. So this actually, I think, is a really, really great use case of how do we create more inclusivity across all industries and all functionalities, and allow for everyone to be able to be a part of that. He said there's another question here that I'd love to send over to you, if that's okay. It's around using blockchain for trading businesses. And I think underscore, it says this business is very spreadsheet based. So I assume the automatic answer is yes, but tell us a little bit about how some of these are really a great use case for blockchain.
Yeah, it seems like there's a very particular use case in that question, but okay, I'll try to answer as general as possible. So trading, it's already happening, to be honest. Like it's already, like we are seeing B2B, like many apps are being considered under like the blockchain technology. In fact, like I was part of like a particular commodity trading that was based on a blockchain. And it's in production right now. It's being used. Like it's been actually like a few years that it's been live. And like when you have many parties involved that are heavily paperwork, this is a very, very typical use case for blockchain you could consider. And also, like if it is a contractual base, again, smart contracts is just on the shine here, right? Like for instance, if you are thinking of like a real estate business where you're buying a house and then there's like a whole, you know, like a chain of people also buying house, like, and then you need to do a lot of contract negotiations, etc. But these are really, really good use cases of blockchain, and some of it is already in production. When it comes to trading with consumers, that's a different story, I would say. So there is still a lot of fear in terms of like these unknown, let's say, technologies. Blockchain is still a scary word for consumer, I would say. But for businesses, we're already leveraging. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of like a general state right now.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I think to your point, there's definitely some strong use cases that are evident and successes that you can leverage, still some learning. So whomever asked that question, feel free to ping Isa afterwards and he will happily give you a lot more depth and detail. Thank you, Isa. Another question has just come in, Cam, that I wanted to send over to you. And it's a very specific question. I work for a software company. I want to do business in the metaverse. I got an Oculus and I don't know what to do next. But I think if we were to take it up a level and talk a little bit about this whole use of hardware when it comes to the metaverse, what's useful today, maybe not yet there, or just your point of view on, depending on the intent or use case, how to best leverage the tools that are out there today. What would you respond to that?
I mean, I think that there's a couple of questions in there, but so what I see as being the places to start, like what are going to be the technology of tomorrow that we should be looking at? Where are the places that I can go to be a part of that is what I hear in this question. And you know, VR is going to continue to be around. It's going to continue to grow in usage. Oculus, with Meta pushing the Oculus headset and continuing to invest in there, I see a lot of staying power in that, especially as Apple enters the market as well. We get a little more competition and the friction to enter into those spaces reduces for developers, but more so for consumers who just want to pop into a virtual world real quick and play some games. But I think that, you know, 2D and 3D 2D and VR will coexist for some amount of time as that transition happens. I don't think 2D will ever go away either. And so right now, if you want to get into the VR space, it's still a little bit in the startup phase. I know it's weird saying it's in the startup phase with Meta creating the hardware, but they're also in a startup phase. If you look at Horizon Worlds, they don't know how to monetize that. They don't know how to attract. They don't know what's gonna stick. And so if you do want to get into the VR space, it's great to be looking at startups that are building things. You can go work for Meta. You can go identify these places where they're trying to answer those questions. Where is the real value here? How does this become something that people pick up like they do their phone and pop in and enjoy that and integrate it into their life? And I think those are the places where you'll find the most opportunity right now.
So if I think like you're absolutely right, Cam. Like one of the other topic is, I guess, is also there's a misconception in the sense that like what metaverse is as well. So the definition of metaverse sometimes like provokes these kind of questions. Metaverse is not just VR or the experience. It's like multiple layers of so many different things coming together. So there's an infrastructure play, there is a platform play, there is like a monetization play, there's a token economics like crypto, etc., etc. There's the avatar business. So there are so many different types of businesses that you can use and kind of like leverage your businesses into these realms. One of the things also is like if you're genuinely just thinking from a VR angle, like you need to look at like education, like training, like these are really like niche markets that like there are many examples of it already. So you can take like active, like simulation is, for instance, like instead of you doing something on the physical world where it's gonna cost you like a significant sum, you can actually mimic that very same simulation in Metaverse and see the results before actually making that investment. So there are so many different plays that you can do. But again, like the real question is like Metaverse is not just VR. So like you need to really look at the technology in a little bit more in depth to understand where your organization can play, basically.
That's a great point, Isa. And I think that really wraps up on where we started off to say that Metaverse was one of the hot topics of last year. Everyone wanted to know, how do I use it? Where do I use it? You know, someone asked me, can I just buy land now and figure it out later? So I think there's a lot of outstanding questions on what it is. And I venture to say that's the same when blockchain came out and AI was a topic, is what is it? And then how do I, you know, get there first, or at least get there enough so that I'm not behind? Our time is slowly coming to an end, which is sad for me because I had a ton of other questions. However, I recognize people have to get back to work. And speaking of getting back to work, I'd love to end our session hearing from all of you on this whole concept and idea of how are these technologies, any one of them, playing a role in the future of work? What does that look and feel like in your perspective? And what can all of us look forward to? And JJ, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. So the AI will definitely have a large impact in the future of work, but in ways that we might not see directly at first. Like, yeah, there are some tasks that we will stop doing, and that might feel like there will be jobs lost. But actually, I think it's a refocus on what makes us kind of unique in the sense of what is our purpose, our vision, our creativity. And I don't mean creativity only in the kind of artistic sense. If it's about writing an essay where you are shaping your opinion about something, this is about what's the best solution to bring to someone. If it's about the next product you want to create. So anything that does not yet exist, it will have this strong human component about, well, what do you want to do and why? But everything that can be sort of run-of-the-mill little templates and things like that will tend to go away. And we will realize that many things that we were doing on a day-to-day basis were actually more simple than what we thought. Like now we have these generative text tools that can write pieces of text that we need to send a letter, an email or something. Well, maybe we were thinking of them as way more complex than they were. We were just tired of making those decisions. And so those are the things we're going to leave behind, and a lot of new works will appear, like the prompt engineering thing here. There might be things about how do you teach or interact with these technologies that keep on learning, how you connect with people, how you adapt them, how you actually make them get the kind of replies that you want to, and that will open a whole host of possibilities. Like, yeah, there will be a displacement, and we must be sure that we're not leaving people behind and we're giving them the tools to do so. But there will be a larger focus on, well, what's that core part of our purpose? And that might be aligned with this idea of, the reduced work hours, like 4 days a week or 6 hours a day or something like that. Because if we don't have to feel so much paperwork, then maybe we will be even more productive with even less time, because we will be more focused on the things that matter. And so it's going to be a whole new world. We don't have really an idea of what will happen in the long term. But in the short term, it's a lot about transforming into that creativity and knowledge part.
Thanks, JJ. I think that's super insightful and also really relevant if we think about, again, going back to your comment earlier around learned behaviors, our learned behavior during the pandemic of how we worked and how that's now starting to shift with a lot of organizations coming back to the office and changing the way that we commute is still something we're continuously learning. I appreciate your insights on that. Cam, over to you.
So speaking of return to the office, I think one of the trends that we're seeing definitely in 2023 is this battle between, employees who want to continue working remotely, offices that won't return to work, and then offices that won't return to work, and the companies opposing them, competing with them for talent, allowing flexibility in working space. And I think that the metaverse, and specifically VR and AR, they really help the argument maybe of that flexible or remote work group, because those are the tools that they're going to use to really compensate for the lack of an office, right? If they're going to try to continue to stay remote, there are things that you lose, like being able to hold a product in your hand if you're a company that builds physical products. And digital twins can really help fix close the gap between those. Or if you build cruise ships or you build hotels and you want to be able to simulate what it's like to walk around in there, all of that VR technology and AR technology enables and reduces that the friction of everyone having to come to one place. And so I think that future of work, we're going to see both of those groups, the return to office and the remote work organizations, have to figure out how they integrate those technologies in so they can reduce the impact that remote work does have on some of those collaborative and social experiences that the workplace offers.
You're absolutely right. We're hearing it day in and day out. And even just looking across this panel, half of us working from home, you get to see a little bit more of our intimate, vulnerable side, dolls, toys, children in the background, books, etc. And half of us going back to the office and trying to balance that act of finding a conference room, making sure that our bandwidth and our networks are up to date so we can have these calls virtually. A lot of that is still coming into question. So thank you for that answer. And Isa, over to you, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I agree with both JJ and Cam. Where we are right now is like we are trying to find an answer to what is the actual contribution of human being, because some of the mechanical thing we can definitely take away. Some of the cognitive things using AI, we can mimic it. Some of the experience that we are having is maybe unnecessary because that can be done through Metaverse or maybe like decentralized organizations, etc. So the real value that human adds is still in question. I think like more and more we define this thing because the puzzle, one jigsaw is missing here is robots. So what does that robots bring into the ecosystem when you combine all these things together? Because then the physical is going to also take a different sensation. So I guess we are still discovering. I don't think there is a firm answer. This battle between work from home, work from the office is going to continue for a little bit more. But definitely the employee effectiveness is improving. Right? I mean, regardless of where we are, some of these tools, some of these technologies helping us to be more effective. Hence, the questions around, 4-hour work or a day or 4 days a week, kind of models, even maybe it's going to be 1 day a week, at some point. So when maybe the robots actually come into the place, we're just going to be robots are going to ask questions around, so which one do you want? So there could be many possibilities, although it sounds super futuristic. I don't think it's that far. We're not talking 50 years from now. The pace that we are seeing in the industry is really, really strong. So when you combine all these things, I think it's going to come down to the personal preferences. Some people, like to stay at home, like to stay, time with family, etc. Some people, like to do these, zoning in, and then they just want to focus, etc. Some people, they don't have kids or family to spend time, so they want to spend time with friends, and maybe they want to do entertainment, etc. All these things, I guess, as long as you contribute to business. So question is, what is that business? What is the revenue generating thing? Could there be a universal wealth that we can all share collectively as human beings? I think these are going to be the questions we're going to ask maybe 5 years from now. And based on the answers and where we want to do, what is government? What is the rules? What are the policies? Some of these things are really, really interesting questions, and there are philosophical debates around it. I think that will define what will be the future of work, I would say.
I agree, Sen. Thanks so much for that. And I think this is a great example of it. I mean, we are across multiple time zones, just the 4 of us here on this call, multiple cities, different backgrounds, different experiences. And I think my takeaway from this conversation, which I really appreciate all of you taking the time to speak on your lens and your perspective, but also for our audience for joining us for this conversation. But really it's around the leveraging what we can from technology to create efficiencies, to create cost optimization where that makes sense, to create new revenue streams and opportunities where that makes sense. But at the end of the day, recognizing that there are a lot more integration points across all the technologies we just talked about today, and we're just scratching the surface, then there are not. And I think those integration points are really key because it really helps us stay connected. And that's really the importance of where technology, I think, brings the most value, is that it helps us connect with each other, connect with the ecosystem, connect with our consumers, connect with our employees. And that's what we have to make sure we continuously do. So on that note, thank you all so much for the time. We could have gone on probably for another hour on this conversation, are happy to do so if you want to connect with us separately via LinkedIn or otherwise. Really appreciate the time today, and good luck with your tech adventures, but know that you're not alone, and everyone's experimenting, everyone's learning together, and everything is changing. So as soon as you learn it, it's probably different. Thank you so much. Have a great, lovely day and rest of your evening.